I'm convinced that everybody loves Kirby for the same reasons. The games are simple but incredibly fun, the aesthetics are almost always inspired and interesting, and the games invoke a sense of innocence and coziness that not many other game franchises do. But for as cherished and beloved as this franchise is, it went through a bit of an experimental phase during the 2000s. None of the games were downright bad, but it seemed like most of them experimented with wackier and more creative ideas. The gimmicks were a lot more weird, there were a few remakes here and there, and it seemed like the series was all over the place in terms of subject matter. One game he's enduring on an epic yarn adventure, the next he's rodent control. For a time, it seemed like every time you picked up one of these games, you'd always been for something different. However, among all these lab experiments, one seemed to stand above the rest. One seemed to be the most daring and innovative, and would go on to become one of the best games of its genre. Ladies and gentlemen, Kirby's Airride. So, fun fact for all my long-time viewers out there, but I love the kart racer genre. The mechanics, the sense of speed, the skill ceiling, the spectacle. To varying degrees, those are all things I look for in not just a racing game, but in games, period. So hearing that Kirby, one of my favorite video game franchises, had a racing game on the GameCube, got me very excited initially. Everything about the game was just so eye-catching. I'd simply never seen a kart racing game like it before. I wouldn't experience the game for myself until a few years ago, but ever since then, I was hooked. I played this game non-stop for a good couple of days. That's how addicting it was. Something about it just kept on reeling me back in, but what was that something? Well, to find out, I think we should dive deeper to see why Kirby's Air Ride is such a goated video game. Spoilers, the answer to that question is everything. In terms of controls, Airride differs from most other kart racers. Instead of holding down a button to accelerate, you accelerate by simply leaving the A button alone. You accelerate automatically, and the only thing you have direct control over is your direction. That's about as complex as your base movement gets, and at first glance, this setup left me feeling a bit skeptical. But the last part of the moveset is the drift. A is now your brake button, and the track design puts emphasis on braking around turns, after which you get a little mage arrow upon completing the drift. It's kinda similar to the older Mario Kart games, to where you don't get a major boost after drifting corners. Unlike those games, however, I still find drifting in Kirby's Air Ride to be very satisfying. Drifting feels very heavy and aggressive in this game, and that makes getting the mini turbos even more rewarding. I still prefer how games like DS or Double Dash handle mini turbos, but I still think that this approach works perfectly fine. Another thing you can do is wiggle around the control stick to do a spin attack, adding yet another offensive option to your base moveset. Keep in mind, however, that it slows you down whenever you use it, so you can't just win by spamming it all the time. It's very satisfying to use when it's not being completely finicky. Overall, these controls turned out way better than I could have imagined. The simplicity makes them easy to understand, but there's still depth, and they have a high skill ceiling to hit, thus making the gameplay very engaging. Speaking of simplicity, let's talk about the items. Instead of your tried and true item boxes, there'll be enemies chilling on the track, and upon selecting them up, you'll gain one of a whopping 11 unique abilities. Oh my god, that is depressingly low. Granted, this is a racing game, and having a huge amount of abilities could lead to a little bit too much chaos. But still a letdown, man. However, much of the more popular abilities are in this game, and they're all very, very well equipped for racing. Take Fire, for example, which has you leading a trail of flames that can damage other racers, as well as launching flames at them, or Sword that can automatically slash at nearby threats, or Wheel that does wheel things, and Plasma, oh my god, it has you tilting the control stick back and forward to make a giant lightning orb of death that works the same way as it did in Kirby Superstar. Oh my god, bro, these abilities are awesome in this game. They somehow took an ingenious mechanic in a platformer and turned it into an ingenious mechanic in a kart racer. How? But for as impressive as that was, we have yet to talk about this game's most defining mechanic, gliding. Upon reaching an incline, your Kirby will glide across the air for a couple of seconds. On paper, this doesn't really seem like that big of a game changer, but in practice, you pretty much gain the ability to skip massive chunks of a track, depending on what type of star you're using. Oh yeah, I should probably explain that last part, shouldn't I? In this game, your Kirby can ride on one of 22 different stars. Each one of them works off the same general control scheme while having their different strengths and weaknesses. There's your standard Warp Star, which is the most well-rounded of the bunch, nothing really much holding it down, But then we have more diverse stars, like the Wagon, which has great speed in turning at the cost of no mini-turbos when you drift, or the Wing Star, which is excellent for gliding, but is terrible for turning. There are even vehicles based off of Wheelie, or our allies from Superstar, having pretty decent enough controls for the most part, but their drift is very unorthodox. But then, we have the Swerve Star. Where do I begin with the Swerve Star? It has some of the best top speed of any star in the game, with the downside that you can't turn the star at all unless you drift, thus halting your speed completely. Now this sounds like a major flaw, until you realize that as soon as you let go of A to do a mini turbo, your Kirby will instantly regain all of its speed. So you pretty much don't even have to do a mini turbo. You can just spam the A button across the turns while losing little to no speed while doing so. It's ridiculous, it's overpowered, and I love it. But then again, that just goes to show you just how much fun it is to experiment in this game. Each star has its own little quirks and exploits, making me try out machines that I normally wouldn't have in any other circumstance. No one star is for everyone. I consider a kart racer to have a really good kart selection, but I can confidently say that about it. Oh, and just in case all of this still isn't enough variety for you, you can unlock Mad Knight and Didi as playable characters. They use similar playstyles to other stars in this game, but regardless, they're still great additions to the roster. All this spectacular gameplay can be found in 3 unique places: Airride, Top Ride, and City Trial. Airride is pretty much this game's arcade mode. Pick a track, pick a star, maybe change the color of the Kirby. The core gameplay shines the absolute brightest here, and it's complemented by some outstanding track design. These tracks take advantage of the core mechanics of the game perfectly, and really do push the possibilities of how well a player can drift and glide their way to first place. These tracks are also pretty short, not going on for much longer than they need to. Most are only 2 laps, and they manage to do so much in the short time frame that they have. It's obviously in part to the satisfying gameplay, but it's also because of these amazing spectacle set pieces that are littered throughout the game. I absolutely love it when racing games do this. They just go a long way to giving the track so much life and energy. And speaking of which, the music. Although it's not Mario Kart tier, the soundtrack is still amazing and surprisingly atmospheric. Each song fits the track very well, and upon listening to them, I can immediately envision the corresponding track alongside it. And a big part of the reason why is because of the song's instrumentation. These expertly composed songs are complemented by instruments that gel with the theme that the course is going for. Sky Sands features flutes and other wind instruments. Machine Passage uses very upbeat synths and kicks. Fantasy Meadows has trumpets, tubas, and big brass instruments. I could go on, but I think you get the idea. This all sounds spectacular. But the most impressive thing about this is that these songs can get away with sounding so distinct without you for a second doubting that it's from a Kirby game. So while they have all these different instruments, they still have that peppy, vibrant sound of games past. And again, I just don't know how they managed to pull that off. And I'd also like to point out that a few of these songs also feature some acapella, thus making these songs feel even more atmospheric and alive than they already do. But back on topic, I think it's safe to say that this mode is probably my preferred way of playing Airride, although it's also rivaled by a certain other mode that we'll get into a little bit later. Next up, Top Ride. This is actually my first time I'm playing this mode, as I never really tried it out before this review. And there's a pretty good reason for that. This mode has you running around a course from a top-down perspective, and the first to clear 7 laps wins the game. On paper, this doesn't sound that bad at all, but then you actually start playing it only to find out that the controls suck. Plain simple. It looks like you're supposed to control your star by tilting the joystick left or right, like how most other top-down kart racers function, but instead, when you're going around turns, you have to tilt the entire joystick in the direction you want to go, and it's just not very fun to control. I mean, once you know how it works, the courses become a complete cakewalk, but even still, these controls are way too complicated for a top-down kart racer. But speaking of the courses, I really do like them. They have these really cool and unique gimmicks, and they're a ton of fun to race on once you get past the controls. However, if I'm being honest, I think the music is probably my favorite part about this mode. They're very energetic and upbeat, and it really gets you in the mood for racing, which is something that all racing games should do with their soundtracks in my opinion. They're also just incredibly catchy. a song with as simple of a title as Grass, has been stuck in my head for the last 48 hours. No cap. It's so damn good. But overall, I would say that I enjoy this mode, but I would never play over the game's other offerings. And speaking of which, it's time to talk about City Trial. Oh my god, this mode is immaculate. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Smash Run from Smash 3DS. City Trial is that same basic idea, but done a lot better if you ask me. You and 3 other Kirbys are plopped into this giant city, and you guys have 5 minutes to collect things that'll prepare you for a special challenge when the time runs out. These things can range from stat upgrades that make certain areas of a star better, or items that can be used to defend yourself. And Jesus Peasus, all of this is so much fun! It's just so easy to get addicted to this game, man. Half the time I don't even bother getting all the upgrades and just explore the city. You can find completely different landmarks if you know where to look. Every single one of them branches out naturally into the main hub, thanks to these rails that take you everywhere across the map. But the cherry on top of all of this are the mode exclusive vehicles you can score. As you fly around, you'll no doubt run into these blue and red boxes. Normally when you break them, you'll just get normal upgrades, but on the chance that you do get lucky, you can get these special parts that, when you find all 3, can grant you access to the Dragoon and Hydra, 2 of the best stars in this game. The Dragoon is bar none the best star in the game for flying, and when you charge up the Hydra, it easily outclasses every other star in the game in terms of speed. I love this. All of this. City Trial is just so perfect. I have over 2 hours of footage from this one mode alone, and I was just sitting back and having a good time playing it. Exploring every nook and cranny, upgrading my star to be the best overpowered thing on the planet. Every time I boot up, I always manage to just get lost in it. Lost in the city. Lost in this game. I think it's safe to say that I like this game a lot. I hate to make the ending of this video sound a bit cheesy, but Kirby's Airride is just too good for it not to be. The fantastic controls, the amazing tracks, a great selection of courses, City Trial in its entirety. I think we might be looking at a perfect kart racer here. It's definitely not without its flaws, and there are still things about it that are kinda lame, but those things are enough to bring down the game's overall quality. Now, this is the part of the video where I go say, game good, go play game. But since they're on the GameCube, yep. Okay, now there are much more qualified people out there to talk about this, but Nintendo is annoyingly stingy about what games they choose to release. It's absolutely baffling that a company with one of the most treasured back catalogs in the industry seems to go out of their way to try to give us the most shallow, cheap, and low-budget versions of only a few of their classic games, while completely refusing to re-release or remaster the other 80%. Again, there are better videos out there that further outline the problem here, but the reason I bring this up is because a game like Kirby's Airride, a game that's so unique, so ambitious, so interesting, needs to be re-released. This game deserves to reach the Switch's audience and to be played by thousands of people. Heck, I shouldn't even be making this video explaining why it's so good. You all should be out there right now playing this game for yourself and finding that part out on your own. But regardless, there are just so few games that are as old as Airride that manage to hold up so well, that manages to be so timeless and accessible in nearly every aspect. It's just so baffling that it's not more widely available. But only time will tell. Until then, I'll be sitting here playing City Trial for the next 55 years of my life. Until then, have a great rest of your day, and keep at it.